Welcome to the HR Uprising Podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda Carney.
Hi there, it's Lucinda, and I'm just jumping on ahead of the Tom Robinson Masterclass because I wanted to give a shout out and a great thank you to everybody who has been downloading over the last 40 odd episodes, because we broke the 20,000 downloads last week, which is a bit of a milestone. In fact, we're nearly 21,000 at time of recording this. Really would never have foreseen that when we started out doing the HR Uprising. So thanks to everybody who's taken part, who's listened, who's shared, who's given reviews. Please do keep it coming. It's hugely, hugely motivating. And there's quite a lot of work involved in putting out a podcast every single week. So it's really helpful to know that people are actually listening and getting value from it. So huge thank you. And then the second thing I just wanted to mention was that we have got 2 programs that we launched them last Monday, and there are actually a few places left, but actually quite a number have been taken up, which is great, which is why I thought it was good just to publicise it while there's still time for people to sign up if they're interested. One is called How to Be a Change Superhero, and it's a 1-day training course. It is a face-to-face training course. It's going to be in Hertfordshire on the 2nd of April. There are some places available still, and I'll give you the link in a minute. In fact, we'll put them on the show notes. And the second one is an HR mastermind. That is a smaller group of people, so there are fewer spaces. The idea of a mastermind is, if you've never heard of it, is where you have a group of people who sort of work and collaborate together in a focused, ongoing basis. So we will meet probably 6 times virtually online, maybe slightly more than that. And we'll meet on a regular basis. Online, we'll take a topic that's of interest to everybody, study it, have some training input that I'll deliver, and then we'll also take a challenge from individuals and do some collaboration and sharing virtually as well. So that's the way it will work, and the idea is it helps people develop, but you don't have to go on a training course, so it's cost and time effective in terms of what you're doing. So if you're interested in knowing more about either of those, you can get the links either from the HR Uprising page, hruprising.com/change superhero, and you should be able to find them there, and they're also on our Actus pages, because that's where we take our payment through that route. That's Actus consultancy. So actus.co.uk consultancy. So if anyone's interested, wants to find out more, message me directly if you've got questions, but otherwise you can look at the information online as well. So enough from me. To me again, actually, as it turns out, but actually this one is myself talking to Tom Robinson from Talent Tomorrow, all about recognition, reward, what works, what doesn't. So I hope you'll get lots out of this masterclass coming up. Thank you. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the HR Uprising Podcast. My name's Lucinda Carney from Actus Software, and today I have Tom Robinson, and he's joining me in a masterclass. Now, Tom Robinson, some of you may remember that name because he was one of our 12 in 12 HR professionals that we had on the show before Christmas. But he's very kindly agreed to come on and do one of our masterclasses. And just to give you a little bit of background, Tom can explain it further, but he runs a business called Talent Tomorrow. Obviously, as ever, all of the connections and links to him, if you want to follow up and link in with him, will be on the show notes at hruprising.com. He's an organisational development consultant. Well, that's putting it simply. We could call him a performance architect, OD practitioner, people geek. There's all sorts of things that he will answer to, but fundamentally, he's about organisational behaviour and people behaviour in organisations. And the masterclass that we're going to investigate with Tom now is really about reward. What really works in terms of reward? So the people out there you might be an R&R practitioner, or you might be being asked what you're going to do with your latest bonus scheme. But Tom's going to tell us he's done some research, and he will tell you actually the things that move the dial. Is that an Americanism? With regard to reward. So anyway, over to you, Tom. Thanks so much for coming on the HR Uprising podcast.
Thanks very much. Good to be here. Thank you. So I think, first of all, just to kind of kick us off, there's lots of commentary around reward, recognition, what it is, the difference between the two. Normally, the way this is described is reward being the tangible stuff. This is, stuff like pay, benefits. And benefits, there's a subdivision of benefits as well. And there's organisations which have sprung up just specialising in benefits itself. And this could be things like tickets, vouchers, cooking lessons, sports tickets, extra holiday, bring your dog to work day, that kind of stuff. And then there's bonuses, EAP schemes, all that kind of stuff. And then recognition. And recognition tends to be the intangible stuff. So this is the thank you, the opportunities, encouragement, extra status. If you're given the opportunity to lead on a project, that kind of stuff.
Doesn't cost money.
No, yeah, exactly. And the interesting part is the thing that makes the most difference for people. I think in organisations, the stuff that's visible, on the balance sheet and on the P&L is the tangible stuff. The CEO might look at the P&L and look at the salary costs, and this is the bonus cost. But the recognition side is often the invisible stuff. But I think any rewards strategy, any OD strategy should be based on evidence. And I have, like you said, completed a bit of research. This was a continuous piece of research over the past 5 years, and it's a survey of upwards of 3,000 folks of all different levels around the world, mostly based in the UK, but global teams. And the question that I've asked them was, what do you value most in your work every day? And these were free text responses, so people were given the opportunity to write whatever it was that they value most in their work every day. And these roughly fit into 12, 30, you could argue 13 different categories of what people benefit from most. And number one, I'm going straight to the golden ticket here, is the feeling of making a difference. So people would describe that differently. So if you are an engineer, it'd be I love fixing stuff. If it's someone who works in healthcare, they love helping people get better. A receptionist might love seeing someone smile. But the feeling of having a job that's of worth, the feeling of being valued.
And is it related very much to the job they're doing? Does it? So
yeah.
Nurse would be nursing. So you've gone into something, you're getting a kind of kick out of something slightly vocational linked to that role.
Yes. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So that they are, they're actually getting a sense of purpose from doing the stuff that they do every day.
So if I ran a training course or did a coaching session and felt that it had really made a difference to somebody, then that's your kick. Or do a podcast and people say, actually, that was really helpful, I've used it.
I call it the kick. So if people get a kick out of doing what they do. Yeah. And second on that list is recognition. And I think that's very closely tied into the first one. So people will describe it different ways, but the feeling of being worthy, of being worthwhile, is how people would describe themselves as getting the best value of doing what they do.
So the recognition, is that external then? Is the feeling you've made a difference, it could be internal or it could be external, as in someone's told you, whereas the recognition is someone's told you.
Yeah, it could be anything. So it could be customer feedback, it could be feedback from your manager.
But it's external generally.
Generally. And then as you go down that list, there are various different other items of, fun and enjoyment, respect and trust from manager, etc., etc. Furthest down this list is number 7 is pay. And then it goes on to more transactional factors. I call them more transactional factors, such as logistics, benefits and perks, working conditions tend to be sort of further down. And number 10 is...
so it's almost like it's Herzberg that says that you have hygiene factors, like the company car type thing, isn't it? That motivate people for a small amount of time, but not longer term.
Yeah, the hygiene factors.
And that's kind of what you're describing here, is the top motivators are all these people-related things like and more intangible, and then they come down to the tangible things which the companies have to spend money on.
Yeah, that's right.
But aren't necessarily as important. Yeah,
exactly right. And benefits, interestingly, come number 10 of 13. And the CIPD's recent research backs this up. I mean, they went one bigger than me. They surveyed 200,000 people in 189 countries, and they found very, very similar stuff. They said the biggest factor is being appreciated, and they put pay at 8th. But very similar data. In terms of, this might be a bit of a nerdy question,
But in terms of those, did people only answer one? So would you be able to put proportion, or were they giving more than one, if you see what I mean?
Often they gave more than, well, in my research, more than one response often. They could give 2 or 3 or 4, but this is how people ranked it in terms of what makes the biggest value for them in their work every day. Now, looking at the science of it, I'd like to say that this is an evidence-based approach. Now, you can only really say that there's a correlation between these two things. What somebody values in their work every day does not necessarily translate to organisational performance. There are correlations, but no direct link. However, it might suggest to you that people are more likely to perform better if they feel like they are being valued and they are of value in their work.
Links to the engagement brigade, which I know you might argue isn't evidence-based, but it's very much a similar sort of message coming through, and they would say there's a correlation with performance and productivity, wouldn't they?
That's right. I mean, I listened to a podcast, I won't name it, but I listened to a podcast just this morning, and I think there are a lot of people who will take these correlations and use them as evidence. So they'll say, Gallup says only 14% of the globe is engaged, which I fundamentally disagree with anyway. And we know that art makes people happy in the workplace. Our own research says that people are happier when art is around work, and happiness leads to engagement, and then 150% higher shareholder value comes from engagement. Do you want to buy some art? Yeah. So there's all these multiple related factors suggesting, and often people wanting to sell something.
Well, many businesses have made lots of money out of linking to employee engagement, because frankly, anything to do with people stuff is very, very hard to create. It's very hard to prove a direct correlation. Yeah, actually. That's right. So in terms of everybody's, what you're doing is you're going, this is the information we have. And as Rob Breen would say, it doesn't have to be direct correlation, but it's gathering as much information as you can that's to make a sensible decision.
Yeah, exactly right. And Deloitte recently said that 87% of recognition programs have zero impact on organisational performance, which might make a lot of people sit up and take notice. But I think there's a word missing from that. I think that 87% of recognition programs have zero evidence for impact on organisational performance. It doesn't mean they have zero impact.
Yes.
It's just that you can't isolate particularly that scheme or initiative of increasing your share value.
Yeah, you can take this through to training and things like that to a certain extent as well. Mm-hmm. I'm interested on the recognition. So in that, what do we mean? I know you said at the start, tangible and intangible, and the benefits, because there are organisations out there that sort of promote employee benefits as a correlation. Probably their evidence base is about employee engagement, in fairness, isn't it? But I heard recently, I was quite surprised by this on one of the groups that I'm on, that the take-up of those sort of programmes is actually quite low. And again, I wouldn't name one of the ones that's out there, but there's a very well-known one that it looks very sexy and it looks terribly glamorous. But actually people don't necessarily use it, which would suggest that they're not valuing it, certainly not having the result, or unless they like the idea of it, and that makes me work harder.
Yeah,
I don't know. What's your view?
I mean, that really is the value of value. Yeah. And that for me is the sort of meta question is, especially in the tech sector, a burgeoning sector. I spent a bit of time in there, and now every tech company that starts up, they've all got a freezer full of ice creams, and they've all got a ping pong table, and they all have free breakfast and beers in the fridge and all kind of things like that. And it's more taken now as it's just there.
But does that become a hygiene factor then? If it's not there, is it a disadvantage?
Yeah, I mean, the balance of power has shifted over time. I mean, people are saying now that it's more of an employee or a candidate-led market. I think that's probably true in some areas. There's definitely more information and more choice for people choosing businesses. Glassdoor, as one of the big ones, people will look at the whole package available to it as well as the organisation's reputation. So it ceases to become valuable, perhaps.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the challenge for HR OD reward people, is to include in your reward strategy the intangible concept of recognition.
And actually, I was thinking it's interesting it ceases to become, because what you're talking about is quite transactional. So I was involved in a webinar last week, and we were talking about onboarding, and someone asked about, how important is it to have goodie bags And I'm thinking, well, I've never had a goodie bag. I think it's quite good if you've got a desk, and back in the day when I was going, have I got a laptop? That was a good starter. Try to get beyond that stage. But these sort of things, the other guy was saying that actually in certain sectors, if you haven't got a glamorous goodie bag, then that's almost a mark against you in terms of retaining people. But again, these are really transactional things, whereas surely if you're listening to this and you can influence your managers in your organisation and you can get them to connect with the person and make sure they take them to lunch on the first day and they connect with them and understand them as an individual, it's real, right? So that's got to have more value.
Yeah.
I feel that would link much more to your list of factors that people, and it differentiates you because not everyone can connect personally.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be a difference of time. So benefits, these attractive benefits that are often listed when you're applying for jobs, they may attract somebody to the job, but as soon as somebody signed the contract, they've started and they've sort of passed their probation or they're on the way, a different set of motivators tend to take over.
Yeah.
People aren't necessarily motivated. You don't wake up in the morning and go, yes, I'm going to be paid today. I'm going to give my best effort. That's almost taken as a given. It's taken, the healthcare schemes and the gym membership is taken as a given. It's just there. I mean, don't get me wrong. People will be annoyed if you took it away, but it ceases to become a day-to-day motivator. And I think the key word, especially in the data that I've gathered, is what do you value most in your work every day?
Yeah.
And people can come to work and they go through different phases of being, firing on all cylinders and being less than productive and less than good at their job. And it's the day-to-day part, often something simple as recognition, the intangible, can just get someone back and performing well again. So
for our audience, what would you recommend in terms of people, because of course these are the intangibles, they can control the bonus scheme, they can control the recognition scheme to a certain extent, can't they, and the salaries, etc. But actually, how can they influence these things which potentially are the more important ones?
So I think probably a good thing to do is to look at where areas have not worked well. So if areas I've seen or even organisations I've worked in and worked for and worked with, and where those areas work really well. So the first one really is where they're not aligned to the values of the organisation. I don't necessarily mean the core values that are on the website or engraved in marble in the reception area, but the things that that are valuable to the organisation. You ask people, what are we trying to achieve? What do we really want from people? What skills, knowledge, and behaviours, and what do our people want from us? So to kind of take a bigger picture of kind of the exchange of labour, we're paying you to show up every day. What do we expect from you in return? It might be in some organisations you would value status quo. So longevity is rewarded. There's maybe long service rewards. There's extra bonuses that are kind of unlocked after a certain number of years of service. Or in some organisations, status quo might be something that you value. Whereas in other organisations, it might be you want door kickers, you want people who are provocative and disruptors. Well, in that case, those sort of rewards won't really work in that organisation. So the first one is the kind of the biggest one is how does it align to what you would expect of people and what makes the organisation successful? And we tend to think in terms of especially profitable organisations, but this could be organisations of any type. I mean, it could be third sector, it could be the army, it could be churches, could be little societies, could be anything. So first of all is aligning it to the values. So is it just values, or is it about, it's almost going back to that feeling like you're making a difference in the role, as in, if you look at goal setting theory, one of the keys is making sure that you can see the relevance of the connection between what you're trying to do and the purpose, your sort of goal, your silk thread, gold thread, green thread, whatever, but that connection. Mm-hmm. I know it's not necessarily the values so much, but it's kind of it's meaning. I'll give you a small example. We've got an intern in at the moment, and it's only day 2, and she's just done an infographic for us using this software that we use. And she's used something at one of the podcasts, and we're going to use it as a download from one of the podcasts. Now, I think that that's quite useful, and I'm hoping she will have a sense of satisfaction, which is greater than having, read through loads of, when you're a new starter and you have to read through all really boring things. She's done something that we're actually going to use, so it's tangible in the value. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that
we'll find out. We'll see whether she finds that's more satisfying. I would. Do you know, is that sense of achievement that you're using your time to something that's productive as opposed to doing something that's a paper exercise?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a very fine line between recognition, reward, and performance-related incentives. I mean, they all go kind of hand in hand. There's grey areas between them all. I mean, I did hear a story recently about an ambulance service. I don't know where it was actually, but they were told to prioritise certain jobs. Well, to get to 8-minute target, they were given an 8-minute target. So the dysfunctional output from that is they prioritised the jobs that were nearby. And they were kind of letting other ones further away, which might be more urgent, more important, let them slide for the fact of hitting their targets. And, you might say that's not technically a reward, but it is a performance-related incentive that they were given.
Counterproductive one, right? Yeah,
exactly. And I've seen lots of ones where teams were kind of pitted against each other. I'd be specific with sectors. It's often, sales-related, let's say sales-related environments. I don't want to go any kind of closer than that. But teams are often in as league tables and, leaderboards, which can often, it may drive performance at the higher end, but can serve to really demotivate from the other end. And also, what behaviours are you encouraging of people? You may argue that they are encouraged, the underlying message is that you're encouraged to fight against each other rather than work together on stuff. I might even take it further and say that the banking crisis that we all experienced a few years ago could have come from where banks are encouraged to hit their overall targets, doesn't matter what means they use to get to them. So they're kind of encouraged to use, let's say, dysfunctional behaviours in order to hit a certain target or an overall goal at all costs, which kind of brings us on to one of the other things that does not work is ignoring the path to get to the result and saying the result is the be all and end all. Yeah.
So it's how you get there. I mean, that's very typically HR way is where it's not just the objectives; it's where you do see some business trying to look at the did you meet the values at the same time or deliver competencies. So it's not just the performance at all costs; it's the how you get it to get some balance there.
Yeah, exactly right. The other part as well is making it not immediate. I know this is an issue close to your heart as well. Recognition is often saved up for appraisal time. And I've got nothing per se against appraisals. I know it's kind of fashionable at the moment to get rid of them. And used well, as with any tool, they can be good. But making sure that recognition, especially, is part of an ongoing cyclical conversation. And that recognition and feedback is linked and entwined together.
100%, yeah. Because it's and I very simple one. I remember years and years ago, someone saying if you hired a golf coach to give you some tuition, and basically they followed you all around the golf course. You got to the 18th hole, and then they said, right, on the hole 1 you did this wrong, and on hole 3 you did this wrong or this right. It's like it's too late for you to practice or get anything benefit out of it. So that's why we shouldn't store it up to the end. We should be helping people to grow throughout the year and also recognise people so they can do good things again and over the course of the year as well. So yes.
And it's important as well that recognition, as well as feedback, is woven into the rest of the OD system or the organisation system. That making sure that this ties in with learning and development, because often managers might need support in actually how to sincerely recognise and thank people for doing a good job. They may not either feel comfortable with it or be very good at it.
May never have had it role modelled.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I did see a bit of research a while ago that said managers who would describe themselves as good or very good at recognising others was something like 71%. So the people managers rate themselves very highly, but
I'm waiting for a really low review.
Team members who would rate their manager as good or very good at recognition was only something like 19%, which might suggest...
That's the 80-20 rule there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it might suggest that managers think they are doing recognition, or they might be, but the recognition they're having is of little or no impact. I mean, it might just be, well done, mate, good job today, high five, pat on the back, and that means nothing to the team member, but the manager thinks they're doing a good job. So there's linking with L&D there. Also, if there's any kind of career development opportunities, buddying or mentoring schemes that might be there already. I heard of recently a good reverse mentoring scheme, which I thought was really interesting. It was in a law firm where, going back to kind of engendering the behaviours that you would want to see in your team, the senior team, the partners, were all very stuck in their ways, and they wanted to recognise these new up-and-coming young lawyers. So they encouraged the young lawyers to mentor the older ones. And I thought that was a really great recognition for showing that they've actually got value in the organisation. It's not just a top-down hierarchy. And kind of it proved really successful, actually.
We're really interested to talk more about that separately. I think we could have an entire podcast episode on something like that.
Oh, right.
How to do normal mentoring, but also reverse mentoring. So you hear of it, but how do you make it work would be quite interesting.
Yeah, indeed. And as well as we're going to kind of link it up with internal communications, how you publicise, how people are doing the things that they're doing well. Internal talent and succession planning. I've got major issues with many succession planning and high potential programs, which I'm sure I will go on to in just a moment. And then, of course, pay, overall financial teams as well. So the important thing is that it's woven in and is not a scheme and initiative that sits alone.
Yeah, so it's neither the saviour nor the to blame, basically. Whatever you do, it's something that's woven into the way your overall OD strategy, people management strategy should be deep rooted in there, But done to a high quality.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean, there's plenty of ways where it works really well. I mean, an organisation I worked with for a long time, one of the things that we used to do really well is immediate rewards. So we used a postcard scheme. So everybody from, I think, supervisor upwards, all the way through to the MD, had these postcards. And the thing that we wanted to be, the thing that we stood for, is being exceptional and memorable. And if people were being exceptional or being memorable, in whatever form that took, we would recognise them for that. So the managers would write a little handwritten postcard and drop it on people's desks and post it to people. And it's just that immediate response, but it's also more genuine. It's more genuine than an email. It's more genuine than an app. It's specific, it's behaviour based, it's immediate and it's responsive to the thing that they have done well in that moment.
It is an interesting thing doing that immediate stuff, actually, just making sure that people, it's often a new habit though for people to think to do that. We often, I don't maybe dwell on things that people do badly or wrong rather than actually catch, really old book, 1 Minute Manager, catch people doing things right.
That's right.
But actually trying to do that, it's a nice example of doing that and how we can maybe encourage more of that going on in organisations.
Yeah, well, that scheme came directly from that book.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
There we go. Great minds.
The other thing as well is a while ago I remember watching something about capuchin monkeys. I think it was a David Attenborough program, and it was looking at how they responded in certain situations. Now I understand this is not adult humans; it's one test. It doesn't necessarily apply to everything all the time. But they were studying something called the social inequity inversion, where capuchin monkeys were given a reward for doing particular tasks. One was given, I think, a piece of celery, and the other one was given a grape, and the grape is seen as the more valuable reward.
I'd be with that.
And the monkeys rejected the unfair rewards. So it was either that they were given an unequal reward for the same work, or they were given an equal reward for unequal work. In either of those situations, the monkey rejected, or was often seen to reject, these unfair rewards. My son does the same. If you offer him something that he's 3.5,
carrot stick doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and he'll quite happily turn down a biscuit if he thinks if he thinks he should be getting a cake. So this, I think, has some kind of translation to organisations. I've seen some very annoyed people. Where maybe an exec team, this is where I was talking about, these high potential programs, you see an exec leadership team go off to some, Ashridge or Holt Business School to go on some very expensive development program in a 5-star hotel with a golf resort. And people get very annoyed at that because they feel like that reward is not fair. Mm-hmm. And some people, doing a lot of good work. I mean, it's not that they're not doing good work; it's that the reward is unequal, is not commensurate with the effort amount of input. And then the other part as well is is making sure that these recognitions are about relationships. One of my biggest learnings over the last few years is that it's not even about the business. And the frustration is often this in this quest for return on investment, we kind of become a bit blinded to actually just the stuff that matters most in business, in life generally. It's not necessarily about squeezing more discretionary effort out of people as if they were some kind of donkey, using this combination of carrots and sticks to kind of improve their performance. It's not even about the business. I mean, most people in any organisation don't really give a damn about the share price, if indeed it is listed on
not unless they've got share options.
Exactly. They care about their own sphere, their own little world of influence, of their own relationships. So this is where line managers can often be the thing that will cause a program to succeed or fail. One of the most successful things I ever saw was people each inputting a small soundbite to a video, talking about how somebody was really beneficial, was really going above and beyond, had made a major difference. And they each said to this, I think it was recorded on an iPhone, they each recorded sort of a 10-15 clip about how awesome this person was. It was kind of edited together into a minute or so clip and was sent to this person. And it had almost no cost, but had probably huge amounts of value. And this is sort of thing is remembered for years and years, if not a lifetime, and is about strengthening the bonds between those people that you work directly with, whether it's manager to team, whether it's peer-to-peer, and it strengthens local bonds and the company by proxy. I don't think it's necessarily all about the organisation's goal.
No,
as long as it's value-based, as long as you're recognising the right behaviours which fit with the overall objective, it's not necessarily about squeezing more performance from people.
It's almost more real you can get without being overly soppy. So it's not everyone feel that was professional, comfortable. It's the higher the value, because we tend to protect ourselves and not do those. I've got a really good friend of mine who's just done it must have been a hugely expensive program with one of the big four, and she's a partner there. But one of the things was we all had to give feedback and as friends and write sort of anecdotes of how we knew her and what you think of her, because you don't say these things to people unless you've had about 3 bottles of wine or something. But actually quite a lot of them were related to wine instances. But she I think she said she was probably quite tearful about some of these things. But often we don't say these things to people, so.
The irony is we put them in their leaving cards.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
As they're departing the business, we say how much we miss them and how much, how awesome they are.
Or something awful happens to somebody, so we should say these things earlier in many walks of life.
Exactly.
And so it's very much about relationships. That makes sense in terms of bringing it forwards.
Indeed. And the other part, talking about how reward often works well within teams is a lot of apps, a lot of software nowadays is making it peer-to-peer, which there is a lot of value in running peer-to-peer recognition schemes. It requires some people being motivated enough to do it, and there is something to be said around the reciprocity of reward. So the more likely you are to reward people is how you've been recognised or rewarded yourself. There is something about I don't know the statistics of it, but the science of giving Christmas presents. They say that there's more dopamine given from actually giving the present than receiving one, and people tend to prefer giving the gift or the recognition than receiving it. I don't know how true that is.
My daughter agrees with that. My son does. He likes giving gifts, but my daughter definitely hasn't got that one yet.
Well, the science is. I don't know the science in organisations there. But I think there's some interesting technology out there which allows you to award credits to people. If anybody out there knows the app Reddit, where you give people rewards and you have a certain number of rewards and you earn the reward which you then give to others. So you don't get the reward yourself. It's all in the giving. So out of 100 points you might get in a week, you could give 20 points to Karen for a certain project and 5 points to Tom, Dick and Harry for this project.
So what does Reddit do?
Reddit is basically a social app where there's loads of groups of conversations, let's say, and the most valuable comments underneath these posts receive awards from the other users of this app.
So it's kind of sharing knowledge.
Yeah.
I naively thought it was going to be something to do with reading books, like Goodreads or something. So thank you for.
No, I'm new to it as well, but I think that it's fascinating how people can reward each other, and there is technology there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be with technology. Old school paper based and face to face recognition schemes and reward schemes work as well. Where I don't know, even if you had little counters you put in a box, and the most number of counters equals a reward for a certain person, or you vote for the thing that you all want to do as a team.
I was going to say, sometimes team thinks it's quite nice if they've done something together and then they all get to share in it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's something around the altruism of reward there. This can have a downside in that you're rewarding popularity. So the more popular people or more charismatic people tend to be more highly rewarded. And let's call them introverts, but people who aren't kind of out there tend to get not noticed as much. So you have to be slightly cautious with some of these things, but having some kind of way of peers recognising peers is good. One has to be careful, though, of industrialising something like this. I think something that works in a small or medium organisation might not work at scale. Not necessarily all apps. I've seen some very good ones and I've seen some okay ones. Is getting an email which says you've received a little sticker from somebody. Some people get a lot of meaning from and a lot of value from. Some people will just immediately delete that email, and it wouldn't be something that's valuable to them. And I think we have to be a bit careful of industrialising reward because it tends to remove its meaning. And it's really as simple as that.
As soon as you feel it's being done for the sake of it or it's insincere, again, it's whether people perceive it to be real or not.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's pinging you a reward, a superstar reward kind of pops up on your screen and the person's sitting 2 desks away from you, that has little to no meaning.
It is exactly the same as, great job. So what are you saying on superstar for it? Or if someone says actually genuinely, if they're able to give you a cup of coffee or whatever their reward system does, and they say, thank you so much, that really helped me with that project. It's about the sincerity and whether you consider it to be meaningful. A lot of the time, isn't it, these things? Yeah,
it's actually more often than not that's the case. I was watching a very old episode of Seinfeld recently, and Jerry Seinfeld was later on in the season where he's dating Elaine, and he gives her, it's her birthday, and he gives her a box, and she unwraps the box and goes, oh, you shouldn't have. And inside is cash, $187, I think, if memory serves. And she says, you got me cash? Really? What am I, your uncle? You give me cash? And he gives her a card as well, and the card says, you're a special gal, a fantastic pal, and more. And she says, I'm your pal? And he says, and more.
It's going from bad to worse.
Yeah, so he's giving her, that's the transaction. The transaction is, I gave you some cash. You could spend it on anything you like, darling, or, here's your card. And then Kramer comes in from next door with this bench that she'd seen in a shop and says, you said this a few weeks ago, I remembered it. This could go in that perfect place in your apartment. And in the card was a handwritten poem, was a quote from Yeats or something like that. So there was more meaning in arguably something that had less value. So the idea here is that it's not necessarily the numerical value that has the reward. Often that can be the opposite, and something that's a really small thing that is almost insignificant can have the meaning.
Right back to the thought that it's the thought that counts. Yet in a very busy world, I wonder whether it's extra hard to make that thought, or do we have the time for it? Or are some people just better at that? Which, they have more of that sort of natural gene. I'm thinking of someone in our team who thinks about, what's going to be going on for the team or someone's birthday, or that's just naturally what's going on for her on a regular basis. Whereas, we're going to go, okay, did I have a cup of tea today? Or what am I going to wear? It's completely different mindsets too. So it's more effort for someone who doesn't naturally think that way.
Absolutely.
But then it should actually mean more, I suppose, if people appreciate that.
Yeah, and as far as, let's call it the organisation. We'll go into a rabbit hole, if you like, about how I believe the organisation doesn't exist. It's just a collection of people and conversations. But let's say the OD team, the reward team, the HR team, they come up with an initiative where, let's say people are given little trophies, and they have a certain number of little trophies, 8 inches high, and they kind of give people the trophies. Something like that would not work with a 5,000, 10,000 size business, because people would just leave them behind. It becomes too big. The system would not work in that context. And context is crucial. Picking the right system to solve the right issue or to engender the right behaviours. Small startups often do an away day. They take the entire business out and they go to, somewhere in the countryside somewhere, and they go kayaking. I've been on several when the business was quite small, but you can't necessarily do the same things as you always did and expect the same results.
And that's not necessarily appropriate for a much larger team. And actually, not everyone's going to love that as well.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So there's something around systematizing. I don't even know if that's necessarily a real word, but industrializing the systems of reward and expecting the same results over time, which doesn't necessarily happen.
Yeah, so what you're saying really is the reward or recognition, whatever we put in place, needs to be proportionate to the culture and the scale of the organisation that you're putting it into. In all of these, if we're the practitioners. And I guess, I suppose in the interest of time, actually, if we were to get to the point of our last 5 minutes or so talking together, perhaps if I kind of reflect on some of the stuff we've talked about, and then you can maybe come in with your final top tips for our audience as to what you think you'd summarise and aim at people. So it was about us thinking about being aware for about tangible and intangible rewards and things that are in our control, which is interesting from an HR point of view, like pay and rewards and things like that. But actually, we can make sure they don't conflict, like sales, that we can make sure that the processes don't have negative impact, like having over-generating competition, let's say, for example, with sales, or engender behaviours we don't want. But the reality is quite a lot of the stuff that seems to make the difference is the stuff that might not be within our control directly as HR, because you're saying it's stuff like people feeling like the reward or recognition is sincere. This is down to how our managers do it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. There is something about making sure that the benefits you're offering are aligned with the values of the organisation, you were saying. There's a purpose there. We can do stuff by training managers to have better skills. That whole point about good quality feedback, making sure that it's not just throwaway feedback, it's got some sincerity and there's specific examples to it. So we've covered quite a lot of ground here. Mm-hmm. If you were to maybe summarise in terms of 2 or 3 takeaways that you think that our audience might want to focus on in terms of this, where would you go next, Tom?
Oh, that's a good question. So one of the best ways actually is just to keep it fresh, change it up regularly. You might have the same system, the same fundamental system, but just change the names of the awards or the rewards, change what you're awarding or rewarding. Just keeping it fresh, because
keep people on their toes.
Keep them on their toes, because if it's Christmas every day, it ceases to become something that's new and exciting. And I think new initiatives, new communication around those initiatives can keep those systems fresh. Otherwise, if you're doing the same thing in the same way every time, I think a lot of the meaning is lost from that.
No, that does make a lot of sense in terms of it's very. It gives you something to say as well to get people to engage with them, and in terms of these sort of programs as well, doesn't it? Rebranding is always the answer.
Yeah, exactly. Another one is trying to make sure that if you're coming up with a scheme or an initiative, especially if you're using technology, is try not to make it something onerous that people have to do, to log on to a system, to send a thing or a voucher or a widget to people. They don't have to get sign off via expenses to kind of to reward people. Just kind of trying to put it in the flow of work. And that if somebody needs to, especially if there's a financial incentive or reward, for people, in that it's very easy to use and is accessible when people are doing their day jobs and they're very busy doing what they do.
Yeah, if you've got to log on to multiple systems, can't remember your password, and then get sign off or buy someone a coffee, it's just not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, better have that pre-authorised, that there's a budget set aside for it, and you have a bunch of coffee vouchers, and someone can just go claim one if they need to claim one.
Yes.
The final one, probably the most important one actually, is tagging back to the survey results, in that where people find most value is in the meaning, and is just making things meaningful. Rather than having some blanket based approach, is making sure that ideally managers have decision making over maybe not the amounts, but what they're rewarding people on. And it's not just like you get an extra day's holiday, or you can work from home here, or you get an extra 5% bonus. That actually maybe a wine lover would get a lovely bottle of wine that they've been admiring from a distance, or a sports lover would get sports tickets, or somebody has just started a new relationship, they get a spa break for two. Something
personalise
that
it.
means something to people. And I understand that's very difficult to do at scale, but if there are some ways of doing that to leave the meaning in there, possibly by giving managers that decision-making ability to reward how they see best to reward, that it ceases to become a reaction. I mentioned earlier about trophies. Now, trophies could be a transaction. You could just go, here you go, there's a trophy, well done. And that's the end of it. And there could be amazing meaning from a spa retreat. But the same thing could happen in reverse as well. So, somebody sincerely thanking somebody and looking in their eyes and saying what they've done well, and giving a little £1 trophy could have the meaning.
Yeah.
And the spa break could be the transaction. So the biggest tip there is just making sure that it's responsive to the thing that the person has done, or the behaviour that the person has demonstrated, and it's actually something that they find valuable and something that they really want to have. And I'll end, on the theme of 3. I'd actually like to do a little shout out for a challenge for people. And I'm going to call this the 3-3-3 challenge. So 3 things to do today, or if you're listening to this later in the day, then do it tomorrow. 3 things to do within a week, and 3 in a month. So the 3 to do today, within a day, is 3 thank yous. So go and speak to somebody face to face. If second best is on the phone, last best is on an email, but ideally face to face. Sincerely thank somebody for doing what they've done, and be specific about what they've done. The second one is do something meaningful for somebody. So something that would I call it a random act of kindness, but in the form of a recognition. So if somebody's feeling stressed, go take some work off them. Volunteer to help them out, for example. So something that's meaningful for them as a random act of kindness. And then 3 things to do within a month. Write a handwritten note. So go buy some cards and go, put an envelope, put a stamp on the envelope, a handwritten recognition card in your own handwriting, no matter how terrible your handwriting is, for a person that you would like to give recognition to. That's my challenge for everybody listening.
Very nice. I like that. I will take that upon myself. I was thinking who I could do that with. That's super. Okay, so then I hope you heard that. Go for it. I'd love to hear from you about your 3-3-3 challenges. And I'm sure Tom, I'll put his Twitter. You're quite active on Twitter, aren't you? His Twitter up there and other social media. Let us know about your 3-3-3 challenges that you're doing. So I guess it's time to wrap up. Just would like to say a sincere thank you to you, Tom, from Talent Tomorrow. Really great talking to you. I thoroughly enjoyed the topic, and it was fantastic to have a masterclass. You've got so much to share with us. Very, very appreciative. So just time to wrap up. So thanks to everybody listening. Please do tune in next week. And remember, it's about learning together, collaborating together, and rising up together. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.